What's up, everyone? I hope I was able to fulfill your ASMR desires with the beginning of this video, the unboxing. One of the things I want to talk about here was the amount of paint you get is kind of crazy. I'm trying to show how much paint's in a Citadel pot. It's about 12 milliliters that's in there. The ProAcryl bottles have 22 milliliters of paint in them. And here's a standard Vallejo size. I believe these are 70 milliliters. So you're getting 5 more milliliters than even the Vallejo paint. And remember that ProAcryl, if you buy 8 of them at a time, the discount makes it about $3.60 American, which is way cheaper than Vallejo, definitely cheaper than Citadel. So that's a really good deal for the amount of paint you get. It's better than the competitor, and that's important. It also comes with an agitator already in the bottle. That's a plus. To test out how well these paints do with airbrushing, I started with the basic Primaris Space Marine here. I had primed in black. I didn't use Monument paints. I used my existing Vallejo primer. Then I used a white ink spray from the top for the Zenithal coat, and I just grabbed the Monument paint. I'm using the burnt red and the Pyrrole red, and let me tell you, Pyrrole red is amazing. It's the brightest red I think I own to this point. I don't own any Chimera paints or anything like that, but out of the Citadel, Createx, and Vallejo paints that I have right now, this red is brighter than everything I have. It's really, really good stuff. Here I'm going to take off the lid, and you'll see that little seal in the bottle. That seal keeps the paint fresh, so by the time it's put in the bottle until you open it at your house to paint with, this paint is airtight, which is a plus. It's a little bit of a pain to get it off, but you only have to take it off once. I usually got a little bit of paint on my fingers trying to take it off because I was trying to scrape every bit of it off into the bottle so I didn't lose any of it. I just went right out of the bottle with it, sprayed it right in, or dripped it right into my airbrush, and started painting. And you'll see right here as I'm going through this little scene, I'm just seeing how it's flowing out of my airbrush. You can see I could paint it a pretty fine line. I could get bigger lines. I could kind of do some dagger strokes, but my pressure right here was set to 20 psi, and 20 psi is probably not the ideal setting for this paint unthinned. Now I know that Monument says that you don't have to thin these paints to airbrush with them, and I agree with them, but not at 20 psi. For me, I like my paint a little bit thinner than this paint is. A little bit of water would have helped. A little bit more pressure would have helped. It did spray just fine. I had no issue spraying this paint out. It did exactly what I wanted to do. I did a base coat of the dark red, switched over to the bright red, and I really didn't have any issues, except something I'm going to touch on here in a minute. But I was really impressed with how this paint sprayed. And here's some after shots of what it looked like when I was done with those two colors. And that Pyrrole red is amazing. So on this next part, let's talk about the airbrushing. Because I sprayed it right out of the bottle and didn't thin it and only had my pressure at about 20 pounds, I ended up with kind of a rough texture, and it's my fault. It's not the paint. I just should have thinned it more. So it had a little bit of a rough texture on the model because I had sprayed it at that pressure. So the next thing I said was let's start painting. This is where I come in. This is where I shine, right? The airbrushing is kind of the simple part where you just sort of spray and point and just it does its thing. But glazing gets very difficult because you got to take this color and you got to thin it way down and put on these light coats that are just slightly transparent. Well, let me tell you, this paint has a learning curve, and not in a bad way. This paint, the pigment in this paint, I don't know how to explain it. It's like the King Kong of pigment. When you put it on, it just conquers all. I had to thin this paint so thin to get it to glaze, which is fine. It was good. I don't have to thin my other paints as much to get a good glaze, and I think it's because they just don't have this crazy King Kong pigment in them. So it took a little while for me to get used to. So I started on this Space Marine. I'm trying to kind of glaze in some shadows. I went with straight green to see how that would go, which I could do with a Citadel color. No, not with not with ProAcryl. It said, "You want green? Here's green, baby," and I got it. So I had to mix a little green in with red, then thin it way down, and then it did perfect. It did exactly what I expected. Next step, I thought, well, I'm going to go higher. I'm going to highlight, and I did not get any orange from Monument for this test. So all I had was this really light yellow. Unfortunately, just made pink when I started putting it on. I thought, I'm going to paint this blood angel. He's going to be cool. And then he started turning pink, and I thought, yeah, it's not really a blood angel. So I did some highlighting. I did some shading with glazing, and it was very impressive. This paint works really, really well once you get past that insane pigment that's in it. It works really good. Even when I was using this light yellow, I added just a tiny bit to this red, and it turned pink immediately. Like, it wasn't just a lighter red. That pigment said, "I'm here, and I'm gonna show up and work." And so I had to kind of go back and forth, and ultimately it got so pink that I tried to put a little bit of red ink on it, which is saturated, right? The pigments and inks are crazy saturated, and it doesn't even look as bright as this Pyrrole red. So the glazing worked once I got used to it. It was just a tiny learning curve. I just had to really cut that pigment. This paint is like, it's got King Kong pigment with like a medium or an airbrush medium in it to make it look. It looks really thin until you start trying to paint with it, and you realize, holy moly, this pigment is amazing. So that's one thing I had to get used to in using it, but it turned out well. I mean, I'm not complaining at all. I really like this paint a lot. I think it's better than the other paints I have, to tell you the truth. And right here I slowed this down so you can see how I'm just kind of doing some edge highlighting on his helmet with a mix of the ice yellow or light yellow, I forget the color, and the Pyrrole red. And you can see how when I drag this, you can just see the pigment laying on top of itself. Like, just in the swipe of my brush, where I end is easily more saturated with that yellow than the red that it's mixed with. It's just crazy. If anything, this would cut your time down painting on miniatures. I love to paint, so I don't care how long it takes, but this would definitely make your paints a lot faster. And if you don't glaze, you just don't like that, you just like to put down paint, you want to get the tabletop equivalent, just get it out there to play, I'm telling you, you would love this paint because it's quick and it is bright, and the pigments are just absolutely awesome. But again, if I had airbrushed it, I would have thinned it just a little bit for how I airbrush. For other people, it might be fine, but what I found was it made a little bit of like a matte texture to it, and then that caused me, when I was dragging my glazes, I could feel it on the surface of the model. I've used this paint since then with just a brush, and it didn't do it. It was just because it was a little too thick for me to spray. Here I'm doing some NMM gold. I'm going to do actually a whole video on this and just release it step by step how I did this. I used Monument's recipe that's on their website for this with the paints they say to use, and I'm telling you, this gold came out like it had LED lights in it. That's how bright it looked because of these amazing pigments. And the white that they sell, the titanium white, I'm telling you, I'm using it right here to do my final like glint, my glint Eastwood right here. And this white was so thick that it almost stood up on its own. It was almost like it was 3D paint, and I had thinned it down, and it seems really thin, but I thinned it more and more. You can watch me right here trying to put more and more water into it to make it a watery, almost to a glaze consistency. It was amazing because that's what you want. People say get solid body acrylics and all this stuff to make a really opaque white with acrylic. This, out of the bottle, water consistency, nothing added to it, is just as opaque as a thick body acrylic. It is insane. So if you like to do the glint every once in a while and give it that really bright white pop in a reflection or something, this white is very, very good. And all the colors I tested in this NMM, I think there's 6 colors in it. They were all amazing, amazing. In fact, I'm going to compare the same thing I painted with I think it was all Vallejo paint. The same Primaris, but he's a Dark Angel, side by side, and you'll see how much brighter, how much more pigment is in this paint in comparison. And this extra NMM gold also pops out the other colors in the red a little bit so you can see it. And then I'll show you a still shot of what it looks like, a little better detail. All right, so is it good? Would I buy this paint? Is it something you need? I would say this paint is extremely good. I wouldn't say it's a little good. I wouldn't say it's okay. It's shocking. I'm surprised more people haven't heard of this paint, and it's not more common. It does come up a lot. I'm in forums and stuff on Facebook and Twitch, Discord, and I do see it mentioned a lot. And I finally just said, this is an American company. This is something that I could get behind. It's not a big company, and it's good. And if it's good, and I'm buying American and all that jazz, it's worth it. Monument has a Twitch stream, and you can see Jen and Jason are their names that basically run the company. You can watch them paint, and they're very good. They're good at painting, and they picked out this paint all by hand. They went through the process of QA for all of the stuff they sell. So I know they know what they're doing. And when I watch those Twitch streams where they paint with their own paint, it has a very cool look. Their style is very different. And I thought it was just their style, but I now that I've seen and I've used the paint, I'm realizing a lot of it has to do with the paint. The paints, the colors of them are kind of in between what you can get from, Games Workshop and from Vallejo, and they just have their own colors that are very cool. And when they combine them together, they look very nice. Their colors look good. I really like this paint. This is the guy that I painted in the videos, and he turned out pretty good. I did it quick. I wasn't like going crazy, and it was a learning curve because I just started using the paint. So the one pauldron there is a little crazy looking, but I figured it out on this side, and it came out good. Here is the same basic Primaris Space Marine that I painted with a Vallejo. Look at the difference in the shoulder pads that this paint made. That's paint. That's pigment. That's the difference, right? It's crazy, the difference in these guys. So I just wanted to show how much difference that paint makes. There is a noticeable difference in it. There's a tiny bit of a learning curve just to get used to it over other paints. If you're used to the common popular ones, there's a little bit of a learning curve, but once you nail it, and it's not a big deal, it's pretty shocking, the difference in it. There's no downside to this paint that I can think of, except for a tiny learning curve. Again, if you're the type that just likes, tabletop, you just want to play, you just want to get stuff on the board, on the table, you want to play, you don't care about NMM or glazing or all the hard techniques, and it's just, you just want to play and you want it to look nice. This paint is excellent for that because it covers really good. It's got a ton of pigment so that they pop. And at the same time, if you want to go crazy and try to be a Golden Demon winner, this paint is also really good for that too, because it's very versatile. It's bright. I can't say that enough. And it works really well in the techniques that we use, like glazing and wet blending and airbrushing, OSL, all of that stuff. NMM, it just works. So I can't say enough about this paint. It's really good. I paid for this paint. I did not get it for free for a review. Nobody gave me anything to give this a good review or sway my opinion. I just wanted to try it. I needed some paint to fill in some of the gaps in the paint I do have, and I just decided to go for it and try it out, and I'm so glad I did. It's very, very good. So I hope you like this video. Give me a like, subscribe, doesn't cost anything, and I'm going to do a couple more videos using this paint. I'm going to do the NMM. I'm going to do a full video of that at regular speed where I explain how I did it and go through all the motions. That's it for now. I'll catch you in the next one.